For 6 months, someone watched Jennifer Walsh through her bedroom window every night before breaking into her apartment and torturing her to death. We found hundreds of photographs hidden in the killer's surveillance post across the street. Images of Jennifer sleeping, showering, living her normal life while a predator documented her every move. They call me detective, and what I'm about to tell you is the story of the case that broke me. The Night Stalker of Riverside Heights. A serial killer I spent 8 months hunting and never caught. The mask I wear isn't just protection anymore, it's shame. Jennifer Walsh, 28, was found dead in her apartment on Elm Street on a cold Tuesday morning in March. Her neighbor called police when Jennifer failed to pick up her mail for 3 days. The kind of small detail that saves lives and solves murders. Except this time, it was too late. Jennifer had been tortured before she died. The medical examiner counted 47 separate injuries, cuts, burns, ligature marks that suggested prolonged suffering. The killer had spent hours with her, taking his time, savoring her terror. There was no sexual assault, no robbery, just methodical, calculated cruelty. The apartment showed signs of careful planning. The killer had disabled the security system using Jennifer's own access code, suggesting surveillance that went back weeks or months. Here's something that will disturb you about serial killers. They don't choose random victims. Every target is selected through careful observation, psychological profiling, and opportunity assessment. Jennifer Walsh wasn't unlucky. She was chosen. Our investigation revealed Jennifer's routine had been completely predictable. She worked 9 to 5 at an insurance company, hit the gym every Tuesday and Thursday, grocery shopped on Sundays. She lived alone, had few close friends, and rarely deviated from her schedule. To a predator, she was perfect. The killer had been studying her for months. We found evidence of surveillance equipment in the apartment building across the street. A vacant unit that had been rented with cash 6 months earlier using a fake identity. What we found in that surveillance post still gives me nightmares. Professional photography equipment focused on Jennifer's bedroom window. Hundreds of photographs documenting her daily routine, sleep patterns, when she was home alone. Detailed notes about her habits, work schedule, social interactions. But the most chilling discovery was a journal written in meticulous handwriting. The killer had documented his growing obsession with Jennifer, describing her as perfect for the work, and planning exactly how he would break her psychologically before killing her. This wasn't random violence. It was a methodical psychological experiment. The rental agreement for the surveillance post was signed by someone calling himself David Miller, but that identity didn't exist. Cash payments, fake identification, no digital footprint. Our killer understood operational security better than most law enforcement. 3 weeks after Jennifer's murder, we found victim number 2, Maria Santos, 31, discovered in her townhouse on the other side of Riverside Heights. The killer had escalated. Where Jennifer suffered for hours, Maria had endured days of torture before death finally released her. The crime scene showed the same methodical planning. Security system disabled using Maria's access code. Evidence of prolonged surveillance. No sexual assault or robbery. But this time, the killer had left something behind. A Polaroid photograph of Jennifer Walsh, placed deliberately on Maria's nightstand like a calling card. Our killer was communicating with us, establishing his signature, claiming credit for both murders. He wanted us to know that Jennifer wasn't a one-time occurrence. She was the beginning of something much worse. Here's how serial killer investigations work. You look for patterns in victim selection, crime scene behavior, and geographical distribution. Jennifer and Maria shared crucial similarities. Both lived alone, both worked predictable schedules, both lived in ground floor apartments with easily observable windows. We established a task force and began reviewing similar unsolved cases from neighboring jurisdictions. What we found was terrifying. At least 6 other women matching our victim profile had disappeared over the past 2 years. Their bodies were never found, but surveillance equipment had been discovered near their homes after they vanished. Our Night Stalker had been perfecting his technique for years, learning from each victim, improving his methods, escalating his violence. Want to know what every detective fears most? When the killer's timeline accelerates. 2 weeks after Maria Santos, we found Rebecca Chen, 26, in her studio apartment downtown. The escalation was horrifying. Rebecca had been kept alive for nearly a week before the killer finally ended her suffering. This time, our killer left more than a photograph. Pinned to Rebecca's bathroom mirror was a handwritten note.
Detective, you're not looking in the right places. I've been watching you watching me. You're always 3 steps behind. DM.
DM, David Miller, the fake identity used to rent the surveillance posts. Our killer knew we'd discovered his watching posts and was taunting us with our inability to catch him. Worse, he was watching our investigation, possibly infiltrating our crime scenes. We threw everything at this case: federal profilers, digital forensic specialists, surveillance teams monitoring potential targets. The FBI classified our Night Stalker as an organized, highly intelligent serial killer with law enforcement or military training. His operational security was too sophisticated for an amateur. But every lead evaporated like morning mist. The surveillance equipment was purchased with untraceable cash. The rental agreements were signed with expertly forged documents. Even the Polaroid photographs yielded no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace evidence that could identify our killer. We were hunting a ghost who left bodies in his wake and seemed to anticipate our every investigative move. The psychological terror of knowing someone could be watching you right now is unimaginable. But first, are you paying attention to the escalation pattern here? Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you do if you discovered surveillance equipment pointed at your home? How would you protect yourself from a predator this methodical? Your survival instincts might be better than you think. Here's what happens when serial killers become overconfident. They make mistakes. Our 4th victim, Ashley Rodriguez, 29, fought back harder than the killer expected. We arrived at her apartment to find signs of a struggle. Broken furniture, blood spatter indicating Ashley had wounded her attacker. Ashley didn't survive, but her resistance gave us our first real evidence. Blood drops leading from her apartment to the parking garage, where we found DNA evidence on a car door handle. Finally, we had a genetic profile of our Night Stalker, but the DNA didn't match any criminal databases. Our killer had no prior arrests, no military service record, no legitimate reason for his genetic information to be in any system. We were still hunting someone who existed entirely in the shadows. 3 days after Ashley's murder, I discovered that I'd become part of the killer's game. Surveillance equipment was found positioned to watch my apartment, my car, my daily routines. The Night Stalker had been studying me just as methodically as he'd studied his victims. A package arrived at my home with no return address. Inside were photographs of me leaving for work, entering the police station, even sitting in my car reviewing case files. A note attached read, "Detective, you're becoming quite interesting. I wonder if you'd fight as hard as Ashley did. DM. Our killer was escalating beyond victim murder to law enforcement intimidation. He wasn't just hunting women anymore. He was hunting the people hunting him. On October 15th, we came within minutes of catching him. Surveillance teams monitoring potential victim Sarah Kim's apartment complex spotted suspicious activity. A figure in dark clothing accessing the building's roof at 2:30 a.m. We responded immediately with tactical units. The rooftop was abandoned when we arrived, but we found fresh surveillance equipment still warm from recent use. Photographs were scattered across the roof, images of Sarah sleeping, unaware that death was watching her from above. Our killer had fled so recently that we could smell his cigarette smoke lingering in the night air. Sarah Kim was relocated to protective custody that night. We'd saved one victim, but our Night Stalker had vanished again, leaving behind only evidence of how close he'd come to claiming another life. Here's what makes some serial killers impossible to catch. They adapt faster than investigations can evolve. After the Sarah Kim incident, our Night Stalker changed his entire operational pattern. No more surveillance posts, no more predictable victim selection, no more extended stalking periods. Instead, he began leaving taunting messages at crime scenes throughout the city. Not murder scenes, but break-ins, vandalism, minor crimes that seemed unrelated until we noticed the signature. DM was here, spray painted in locations that formed a pattern across the city, a map only he understood. The messages were psychological warfare designed to let us know he was still active while making it impossible to predict his next move. He'd evolved from serial killer to phantom, present everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. 8 months after Rebecca Chen's murder, I received a final communication from the Night Stalker. Not a threatening letter or surveillance photographs, but something far more disturbing. A detailed critique of our investigation, pointing out every mistake we'd made, every clue we'd missed, every opportunity we'd wasted. The letter demonstrated intimate knowledge of our investigative techniques, our evidence processing, even confidential details that shouldn't have been accessible to civilians. Our killer hadn't just been watching his victims, he'd been infiltrating our investigation, possibly from the beginning. The final paragraph chilled me to my core.
Detective, you've been an entertaining opponent, but this game has become boring. I'm moving to more challenging territory. The women of Riverside Heights can sleep peacefully now. My work here is complete. Don't bother looking for me. I've already forgotten you exist. DM.
This case destroyed something fundamental about my faith in justice and investigative procedure. For 8 months, I lived and breathed the Night Stalker case, analyzing every piece of evidence, interviewing every potential witness, following every possible lead into dead ends. The mask I wear now hides more than my identity. It conceals the knowledge that I failed the women who died while I was always 3 steps behind their killer. Jennifer, Maria, Rebecca, and Ashley deserved a detective smart enough to catch their murderer. Instead, they got me. The Night Stalker's final letter sits in my desk drawer, a reminder of professional failure and the limits of human justice against inhuman evil. David Miller is still out there somewhere, probably reading police reports about his current work, laughing at investigators who think they understand what they're hunting. The Night Stalker taught me that some evil is simply too intelligent to be caught by conventional means. If you're a woman living alone, if you keep predictable routines, if you've ever felt like someone was watching you, trust that instinct, because somewhere in the shadows, predators like David Miller are always hunting for their next perfect victim. The investigation into the Night Stalker remains officially open, but unofficially, It's a cold case that will never be solved. Some killers are caught by evidence and procedure. Others, like David Miller, simply disappear into the darkness they came from. The next case on my desk won't be as sophisticated or psychologically complex, but it will be solvable. And that's what I need right now. A reminder that sometimes justice actually wins. What did you think of this case? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more true crime stories like this, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Home invasion, elderly couple attacked. Margaret Richardson, 73, was dead at the scene. Her husband Harold, 76, was barely alive with severe head trauma. The person who found them, their 19-year-old granddaughter Emma, who'd come to check on them after they missed their nightly phone call. She was hysterical, covered in her grandfather's blood from trying to save him, begging paramedics to help. I arrived at 1623 Elm Street expecting a typical home invasion. What I found would become one of the most complex cases of my career. The Richardson house painted a picture of violence and chaos. Front door forced open, furniture overturned, valuables missing. Margaret Richardson had been struck multiple times with a blunt object, likely a metal pipe. Harold had similar injuries, but somehow survived. The safe was empty. $3,000 in cash, gone. Margaret's jewelry, missing. Credit cards, wallets, everything of value had been taken. It looked like a textbook robbery gone wrong. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it yet, but my instincts were screaming that this scene was too perfect, too textbook, like someone had studied what a robbery should look like and recreated it. Emma Richardson sat in the ambulance, a blanket around her shoulders, unable to stop shaking. She was a petite brunette with large brown eyes, the picture of innocence and grief. She'd been raised by her grandparents since age 12, after her parents died in a car accident. She told me she visited them every day after classes. They always called each other at 9 p.m. Always. When they didn't answer, she knew something was wrong. She'd driven over immediately and found the door open, her grandmother in the hallway, her grandfather in the bedroom. Emma had tried CPR on both of them, called 911, done everything right. The paramedics praised her quick thinking. She might have saved her grandfather's life. Through her tears, she begged me to find whoever did this. As I interviewed Emma over the following days, small things began to bother me. She said she'd been at the library until 8, but the library closed at 7. She claimed she'd last talked to her grandparents at noon, but phone records showed a call at 3:17 p.m. When I asked about these discrepancies, Emma seemed genuinely confused. She attributed it to shock, to grief clouding her memory. It made sense. Trauma does strange things to memory. But I've learned to pay attention to these small inconsistencies. Her roommate Jessica confirmed Emma had been in their dorm room from 7 p.m. until she left to check on her grandparents at 9:30. They'd been studying together, ordered pizza. The alibi was solid, so why did something still feel wrong? Harold Richardson remained in a coma at Riverside General. Emma never left his side. She slept in the hospital chair, held his hand, read him his favorite books. The nurses were touched by her dedication. Here was a granddaughter who truly loved her grandfather. But I noticed odd details. Emma always came alone. No friends visited, no other family. When I asked, she explained her grandparents had been private people. that she didn't have many close friends. It was just the three of them against the world. I watched her watching the monitors tracking Harold's vitals. Most family members look at comatose loved ones with hope. But sometimes, when Emma thought no one was looking, I saw something else in her eyes. Something I couldn't quite identify. 3 days into the investigation, I made a discovery that changed everything. Harold and Margaret Richardson had recently updated their life insurance policies. Each policy was worth $500,000. The beneficiary? Emma Richardson. $1 million total. When I asked Emma about it, she seemed shocked. She claimed she had no idea about any life insurance, that her grandparents had never mentioned it. Her surprise appeared genuine, but the policies had been updated just 3 months ago, and the insurance agent remembered Emma being at the appointment. $1 million. That's a lot of money for a 19-year-old college student. But having a motive doesn't make someone guilty. I needed more. 6 days after the attack, Emma's roommate Jessica asked to speak with me privately. She was nervous, fidgeting, clearly struggling with something. What she told me shattered Emma's alibi completely. Jessica admitted she'd lied. Emma had asked her to say they were together that night, but they weren't. Emma had left at 6 p.m. and didn't return until almost midnight. She'd been agitated when she returned, claimed she'd been with a boyfriend her grandparents didn't approve of. Jessica had agreed to lie because she thought she was helping her friend avoid family drama. But now, with Margaret dead and Harold in a coma, she couldn't keep the secret anymore. She was scared she'd been covering for something much worse. With Emma's alibi destroyed, I dug deeper into her phone records. What I found was disturbing. Hundreds of calls and texts to 2 numbers belonging to Marcus Webb, 26, and Derek Payne, 31. Both men had criminal records. Both were drowning in debt. The messages were vague but suspicious. References to the plan, the timeline, making it look right. And most chilling, sent 2 days before the attack. Remember, both problems need to be solved. No loose ends. When I tracked down Marcus and Derek, they denied knowing Emma beyond being casual acquaintances. But they were nervous, sweating, clearly lying. I didn't have enough to arrest them yet, but I knew I was getting closer to the truth. Bank records revealed something shocking. For months, someone had been making small withdrawals from Harold and Margaret's accounts, using their ATM cards, always under $500, amounts that wouldn't trigger alerts. The total stolen, over $15,000. Security footage from the ATMs was grainy but revealing. A figure in sunglasses and a hoodie, trying to hide their identity. But the walk, the posture, the way they held their head, I'd seen those mannerisms before. During my interviews with Emma, the withdrawals matched deposits into Emma's account, which she'd immediately transferred to Marcus and Derek. She'd been paying them in installments. But for what? The picture was becoming clearer, but I needed concrete evidence. Day 8. Harold Richardson opened his eyes. His first words to the nurse weren't about his pain or asking about his wife. They were, "Where's Emma? Is Emma safe?" When I arrived, Harold was confused but lucid. He remembered the attack. 2 men had broken in, attacked them in their bedroom. He tried to fight back but was overpowered. He remembered Margaret screaming, then silence, then darkness. But then Harold said something that made my blood run cold. "There was someone else," he whispered. "Someone in the doorway, watching. Someone who didn't help us. Someone who told them what to take." I showed Harold a photo array, mixing Emma's picture with those of other young women. His hand shook as he pointed to one photo, Emma's photo. "She was there," he said, tears streaming down his face. "My Emma was there. She watched them hurt us." Harold's memory came back in pieces. Emma hadn't participated in the violence, but she directed it. He remembered her voice, calm and controlled, telling the men to check the safe and make it look real. Most heartbreaking, he remembered making eye contact with her as he lay bleeding, seeing nothing in her eyes but cold calculation. The grandfather who'd raised her, loved her, given her everything, had seen his granddaughter's true face in what he thought were his final moments. And that face had shown no mercy, no love, no regret. I arrested Emma Richardson at her grandfather's bedside. She was reading him poetry, playing the devoted granddaughter to the end. Even as I read her rights, she maintained her innocence, crying that her grandfather was confused, that his injuries had affected his memory. But when I mentioned the phone records, the bank footage, the payments to Marcus and Derek, her mask finally slipped. For just a moment, I saw the real Emma, cold, calculating, furious at being caught. Then the mask went back on, and she demanded a lawyer. Marcus Webb and Derek Payne were arrested within hours. Faced with potential death penalty charges, both confessed. Emma had planned everything, paid them $50,000 each to kill her grandparents and make it look like a robbery. The insurance money would have made her rich. The trial revealed the full scope of Emma's deception. She hadn't been in college for over a year, having dropped out but pretending to attend classes. She'd been living a double life funded by theft from the very people who loved her most. She owed money to drug dealers, faced eviction, had maxed out credit cards. The insurance money wasn't just greed, it was desperation. But instead of asking for help, she'd chosen murder. Instead of facing her failures, she decided to eliminate the only people who'd ever truly loved her. Psychological evaluation revealed Emma as a clinical sociopath. The tears, the devotion at the hospital, the grief, all carefully calculated performance. She'd viewed her grandparents not as family, but as obstacles to the life she wanted. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole for murder, plus 40 years for attempted murder. As the verdict was read, Emma finally showed her true self. No tears, no shock, just rage at losing her game. Harold Richardson lived another 18 months after the trial. Friends said he never recovered from the betrayal. He died in his sleep, and many believe he died of a broken heart. The granddaughter he'd loved had killed his wife and tried to kill him for money. Emma Richardson now spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Marcus Webb and Derek Payne are serving life sentences. The $1 million Emma killed for never materialized. The insurance companies voided the policies due to her crimes. What makes this case so chilling isn't just the murder, it's the betrayal. Emma had spent months planning, studying her grandparents' routines, gaining their trust while plotting their deaths. She'd sat at their dinner table, accepted their love, all while seeing them as nothing more than obstacles to money. This case taught me that evil doesn't always look like evil. It can be young, innocent looking, someone you'd never suspect. It can call you grandpa, hug you goodnight, and hold your hand while planning your murder. The mask I wear as detective has seen a lot, but Emma Richardson proved that the most dangerous predators are often the ones hiding behind the most convincing masks of innocence. They still call me detective. The mask stays on. But now, when I see families together, I wonder what secrets hide behind their smiles. When I see young people caring for elderly relatives, I remember Emma Richardson and the performance she gave. What Emma did wasn't just murder. It was the ultimate betrayal. She destroyed the meaning of family, of trust, of love itself. She proved that sometimes the person who seems to love you most might be the one planning your end. Some cases you solve, others solve you, changing how you see the world forever. Emma Richardson's case did both. It solved itself through evidence and testimony, but it also solved a piece of my faith in humanity, leaving me forever changed. The Richardson case is closed, but the questions it raises remain open. How do we trust when trust can be so thoroughly betrayed? How do we love when love can be faked so convincingly? How do we know who someone really is behind their mask? If you found this story compelling and disturbing, please like and subscribe for more true crime cases that reveal the darkest corners of human nature. Share your thoughts in the comments. Could you have seen through Emma's mask? Remember, evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like someone you love. Stay safe out there and trust your instincts. They might save your life. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey made a frantic 911 call from her Boulder, Colorado home.
911 emergency. We need him. Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry. Patsy.
Her 6-year-old daughter, Jonbenet, was missing, and she'd found a ransom note demanding $118,000 for the child's safe return. The kidnapper claimed to be part of a foreign faction and threatened to kill Jonbenet if the family contacted police. But Patsy had already broken the first rule by calling 911. Within minutes, the Ramsey house was swarming with police officers, friends, and family members. What should have been a sterile crime scene became a contaminated maze of footprints, fingerprints, and disturbed evidence. As an investigator, this immediate contamination would haunt the case forever. Here's what 25 years of investigating kidnappings teaches you about ransom notes. Real kidnappers write short, direct demands. They don't compose 2.5-page manifestos in the victim's own home, using the family's notepad and pen. The Ramsey ransom note was unlike anything I'd seen in my career. It contained movie quotes, specific instructions about delivery methods, and even wished John Ramsey good Southern common sense. Most telling was the ransom amount, exactly $118,000, which happened to match John's recent Christmas bonus almost to the dollar. FBI behavioral analysts immediately flagged this note as suspicious. Real kidnappers don't sit in victims' homes writing novels. They grab the target and run. This note was written by someone comfortable in the Ramsey house, someone who had time, privacy, and intimate knowledge of the family's finances. At 1:05 p.m., after 8 agonizing hours of waiting for kidnappers who would never call, John Ramsey made a discovery that changed everything. In a basement room the family called the wine cellar, he found Jonbenet's body. The scene was horrific. The 6-year-old had duct tape over her mouth, a makeshift garrote around her neck constructed from nylon cord, and a broken paintbrush handle, and her hands were loosely bound above her head. The paintbrush came from Patsy's art supplies in the basement. But here's what bothered me immediately. This wasn't a kidnapping gone wrong. The staging was elaborate, almost theatrical. Someone had spent considerable time constructing that garrote, applying the duct tape, and positioning the body. This was either the work of a sadistic killer who enjoyed the process, or someone trying very hard to make a murder look like something else. The medical examiner's findings painted a disturbing picture. Jonbenet had died from asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. In simpler terms, she'd been struck in the head with tremendous force, then strangled with the garrote approximately 45 minutes to 2 hours later. This timeline is crucial for any detective analyzing the case. Someone had time between the head blow and the strangulation. Time to think, to plan, to construct an elaborate crime scene. This wasn't a moment of rage followed by immediate remorse. This was calculated staging. The autopsy also revealed undigested pineapple in Jonbenet's stomach, indicating she'd eaten fresh pineapple within hours of her death. This detail would become critical because investigators found a bowl of fresh pineapple on the kitchen table with a spoon. The family claimed they didn't remember giving Jonbenet any pineapple that night. Detective Lou Smith, brought in to review the case, became convinced an intruder had entered through a basement window. He pointed to a suitcase positioned below the window and argued it could have been used as a step. But here's what my experience tells me about break-ins. Desperate criminals don't write lengthy ransom notes after killing their victims. The supposed entry point showed no consistent signs of forced entry. If someone had crawled through that window on a cold December night, there should have been more physical evidence. In 2008, the Boulder County District Attorney's Office formally exonerated the Ramsey family based on DNA evidence found on Jonbenet's clothing. The DNA profile belonged to an unknown male and didn't match any family member. Case closed, they declared. But here's what the DA's office didn't emphasize. Forensic experts later revealed this DNA evidence was extremely limited and degraded. We're talking about tiny amounts of genetic material that could have come from manufacturing processes, previous handling of clothing, or any number of innocent sources. The DNA has never produced a match in CODIS, the National DNA Database. After nearly 30 years and millions of comparisons, this profile hasn't connected to any known criminal. That's unusual for DNA evidence from a violent crime committed by a stranger. Professional investigators learn to read family dynamics during crisis situations. The Ramsey family's behavior in the days following Jonbenet's murder raised questions that persist today. Within days of their daughter's death, John and Patsy hired separate criminal defense attorneys. They refused to be interviewed separately by police for months. When they finally agreed to formal interviews, it was under controlled conditions with their lawyers present. This isn't necessarily evidence of guilt. Any competent attorney would advise wealthy clients to protect themselves in a high-profile murder investigation. But it also prevented investigators from conducting the type of intensive questioning that might have revealed inconsistencies or additional information. The evidence in this case is more complex than most people realize. But before we dive into the most shocking revelations, tell me, what's your theory so far? Do you think an intruder killed Jonbenet, or was this an inside job? Drop your detective analysis in the comments below. Your insights might surprise you when you hear what comes next. 9-year-old Burke Ramsey was in the house the night his sister died. Initial police reports indicated he slept through everything: the supposed kidnapping, the frantic search, even the discovery of Jonbenet's body. For investigators, this seemed unusual, but not impossible. Years later, enhanced audio analysis of the 911 call revealed what might be Burke's voice in the background, suggesting he was awake when his mother called police. This contradicted the family's initial statements about Burke sleeping through the entire incident. The pineapple evidence becomes more significant when considering Burke's presence. If Jonbenet ate pineapple shortly before her death, and a bowl was found on the kitchen table, who gave it to her? The family's inability to explain this detail remains one of the case's most persistent mysteries. As a detective reviewing this case, The investigative failures are painful to catalogue. The crime scene contamination on December 26th destroyed crucial evidence before it could be properly collected. Friends and family members walked through the house, handled potential evidence, and created a forensic nightmare. The Boulder Police Department's inexperience with homicide investigations became immediately apparent. They failed to separate family members for individual questioning, allowed the house to be cleaned before thorough processing, and didn't establish a proper chain of custody for critical evidence. The decision to let John Ramsey search the house with a family friend was particularly problematic. When he discovered Jonbenet's body, he immediately picked her up and carried her upstairs, destroying the original crime scene and contaminating any transfer evidence that might have existed. In 1999, a Boulder County grand jury heard evidence in the Ramsey case for over a year. The proceedings were secret, but in 2013, portions of their decision became public, revealing a shocking conclusion. The grand jury voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey, not for murder, but for child abuse resulting in death and accessory to first-degree murder. They believed the parents either committed the crime or helped cover it up. However, District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictments, claiming insufficient evidence for conviction. This decision effectively buried the grand jury's findings for 14 years and allowed the case to remain officially unsolved. Today, the Jonbenet Ramsey case remains officially unsolved. In December 2023, the Boulder Police Department announced they were convening an external cold case panel to review all evidence using modern forensic techniques. Advanced DNA testing methods that didn't exist in 1996 might finally provide answers. Touch DNA analysis, genealogical matching, and enhanced genetic profiling could potentially identify the unknown male DNA profile or eliminate it as meaningful evidence. But here's what concerns me as an investigator. 27 years of contamination, degradation, and mishandling may have destroyed the very evidence needed to solve this case. Time is the enemy of forensic evidence, and too much time has passed. After analyzing this case for years, I believe the answer lies in the basement of the Ramsey house on December 26, 1996. Someone in that house knew more than they revealed. Someone wrote that ransom note. Someone constructed that garrote. Someone staged that crime scene. The intruder theory requires believing that a stranger entered the house, spent hours writing a ransom note, killed Jonbenet in an elaborate manner, then left without taking anything or leaving definitive evidence of forced entry. It's possible, but it defies criminal logic and investigative experience. The family involvement theory requires believing that parents could kill their child and then stage an elaborate cover-up while calling police and friends to the house. It also defies human nature and parental instinct. This case may be unsolvable, not because we lack evidence, but because the truth is too painful for society to accept. Sometimes the most obvious answer is also the most unthinkable. The Jonbenet Ramsey case isn't just about one family's tragedy. It's about the limits of justice when evidence is contaminated, witnesses aren't forthcoming, and the truth becomes too painful to pursue. Until someone decides to tell the complete truth about what happened in that Boulder house on December 26, 1996, Jonbenet Ramsey will remain not just an unsolved case, but a reminder that some secrets die with the people who keep them.